Wednesday night means one thing, and it's the best thing of the week. Mark Latham in the man cave, week and a bit to go till the state election in New South Wales, but voting actually starts on Saturday. The One Nation leader and the powerhouse is shaking up the upper house and the lower one as well. The great man, how are you?
Great, Paul, to be here in the man cave. I always wonder, why is there only one man cave in Australian TV? It should be everywhere.
I agree.
You know, this is the cultural deteration we've been witnessing.
Imagine the 7:30 report man cave. Imagine...
Toxic masculinity. They'd be in here colouring it rainbow.
Peter Brock helmet, how dare you? Don't you know his attitudes?
Right, blokes can't be blokes.
So today, energy prices way through the roof, right? You've already talked about the extra taxes that are going to be in New South Wales here. This is front and centre of the election. This should have been the entire conversation of the leaders' debate. Instead, we were getting questions about, can you name your kids in the order of the ages that they were born? But that was a real question. This price rise, sure, it's 20% for houses, but for small business, it's into the 30s.
Well, Matt Kean has not only destroyed the New South Wales Liberal Party, he's destroyed the cost of living in this state, because you've got to pay for these renewables in the Western Districts. You've got to pay most particularly for the transmission corridors and lines that go out there. We're the only country in the world with a thing called rewiring the nation. Hundreds of billions of dollars rebuilding the electricity grid. Someone's got to pay. Kean's taxing the distributors, pass it straight on to the consumers, and today we got the first real costing of what it means for small business, a 15 to 25% increase in electricity bills on the default, and for hundreds of thousands of residential, a 21% increase in New South Wales. So this is what we always said, Kean would cost you. Kean would cost you big time with rebuilding the electricity grid unnecessarily. We used to have the most affordable, reliable power in the world. It's massively expensive, and it's knocking people for six.
And the plan is to knock 30% of it out in the next 12 months or so with the existing coal-fired power. So you think it's bad now, wait till there's only two wheels left on the car as opposed to the three and the 30s.
Well, and the other disaster, Paul, that the backup power, the cavalry coming over the hill, which was supposed to arrive, Turnbull's $20 billion white elephant of Snowy 2.0, massively behind time and over budget, and Chris Bowen stuffing around with hydrogen at the Curry gas peaking plant 18 months overdue. So this is a disaster on every single front. The answers that we proposed in the Parliament 2.5 years ago for One Nation, keep the coal going, do your gas peaking and bring in nuclear, all dismissed. They put all their eggs in the renewables basket, and today you see these power bills. You can only feel sorry for the businesses and the families having to pay them. You know, the arsonists turning up with the hose, the garden hose, to try and douse the fire. So Bowen's lost the plot on this stuff, and reality just tells you, if you had the most affordable and reliable power in the world, why did we ever change? Under the delusion that Chris Bowen and Matt Kean are going to save the planet, give me a break. New South Wales has 0.4% of global emissions. We can't save the planet. We've got to save the electricity grid. We've got to save the state from blackouts, which are now forecast after the closure of Eraring, and we've got Liddell closing just next month. And we've got to save households and businesses from these electricity prices going through the roof.
And I mentioned it earlier in the show, but there's a bloke who runs a dry cleaners that's got a power bill of $22,000. How the hell does anyone pay this? Well, how does any normal business, as well as rent, as well as everyone else?
Well, they're barely paying it. There's a restaurant that went broke in the Shire, publicised on Channel 7. They couldn't pay the power bill. And it gets worse on the 1st of July. Why rewire the nation when we had reliable coal-fired power, gas, you could bring in nuclear? I mean, we're going to have nuclear subs now. You've got to have nuclear power generation as well. You know, these are things that are just so logical that the major parties just don't see.
Now, I get emails almost every night, every time I hook into the Premier, and I hooked into him hard about, you know, lifetime ban for a kid that says something stupid at the football, but please forgive me for wearing the Nazi uniform when I was 21. He eventually backtracked on that because, well, it was common sense. But I get emails from people saying, oh, you're clearly setting up for a Labor government, Paul. No, here's what I want. This bloke and his team to have the say in the upper house.
Well, Paul, the most likely scenario, according to the polls, realistically, is that Labor will fall a little bit short. They'll turn to the Greens automatically in the lower house to have a Labor-Greens alliance, and the Greens will be demanding drug legalisation, full drug legalisation in New South Wales, gender fluidity teaching in schools, closed coal yesterday, blackouts, even faster rush to 100% renewables and higher power bills. So One Nation, we are the logical handbrake, the logical insurance policy against all that left-wing madness in the upper house. And we can be a blocker against the worst extremes of the Labor-Green alliance. So I think we offer value for the vote, and if we're there in the upper house, we're a party of fighters, no surrender, no white flag. We'll be blocking this sort of Labor-Green madness and doing it with gusto.
Now, what about Perrottet and this idea that, 8 years from now, or 8 years after the election, which would mean after 2 elections' time, there would be the beginnings of kids being able to have up to $48,000 on their 18th birthday, but apparently the Premier says he'll help decide how that'll be spent. You and I both know if a kid gets $48,000 when they're 18, they're either going to go first class overseas or they're going to buy a brand new car.
Well, Perrottet says think of the kids, and he lined them up at his campaign launch. Well, in New South Wales, he and Matt Kean, as Treasurer, have got the state in over $120 billion of net debt.
Yep.
That's $17,000 for every man, woman and child. Each of those kids there has a state debt liability around their neck of $17,000.
Jeez.
And if you said to those kids, I'm sure, just as you said to my kids or your kids, what would you rather have? Clear the $17,000 liability that your generation has to pay off. It won't 100%. Be you and me saying
100%.
Their generation and probably their kids having to pay off this huge debt that's been accrued. Or would you have that cleared, or would you have $400 per annum? They'd say, well, get rid of the $17,000. So, and the thing about the $400 per annum, that's borrowed money too. It's all borrowed. Every single dollar that Perrottet is committed to is borrowed money. So I don't think lumbering the next generation in debt and then saying you can have $400 a year in return, all borrowed as well, adding to the debt, is much of a deal for those kids.
Straight shooter on power, straight shooter on debt, now straight shooting about parents' rights. Again, the consequences of giving you as much oversight as possible in that upper house means potentially we can get towards parents' rights becoming legally enshrined.
Yeah, we need them. Paul, I get so many parents who ring my office and say, look, my daughter's just come home from Year 8 English and I found out it's gender studies. I've had grandmothers on the phone crying about gender fluidity issues at the school that were hidden from the family, the parents and the grandparents, and no good ever comes from keeping parents in the dark, I can tell you that. And any teacher who thinks they're more important than the parent will think again. There's a lot of good teachers out there, but parents are the primary educators of their children. That should be enshrined in law. Schools must have a legal responsibility to always tell the parents significant news about academic progress, personal development issues with the children. No secrets kept from the families and the parents. And I think parents need a legal right to withdraw their children from a class that rubs up against their family values, ethical, moral and religious.